Can religions be on a God search? You'd think they would be, but are they? Hi, this is Michael Shevack, and welcome to Godsearch. If you're here, you're making me very happy because it means you're on a God search. Now, you may have a religion, you may not have a religion, you may be an atheist, you may be a humanist, you may be an agnostic, you may be anything that exists. But if you're the kind of person that is searching for meaning, searching for some kind of truth, and searching for some sense of purpose to your actions and your well-being, and the experience of good, which I like to think is the origin of the word God. Academics might disagree, but I like to think that. And if you're looking for that, then you are on a God search, whether you believe in God or not. All right. Now, what I'd like to bring up is a question that is so obvious that oftentimes people don't ask the question, which is, are religions on a God search? Are religions on a God search? Now, what a very, very strange question, because oftentimes we don't think of religion that way. We don't think about it. We think about religions as organized worship. We oftentimes think of it as a morality policeman telling you what to do, telling you how to feel. We think of them oftentimes in terms of being sexual police, which after 1960s and 70s, that's something which is completely out of fashion. We think about religion as being oftentimes justification for powers that be to do what they want, and try to convince people through the coercion of religious politics and religious publicity that it is good and virtuous. We think of religion many, many ways, aside from some of the more traditionalist, conservative religions, where they have a very clear doctrinal delineation of who they are. Religion in the United States and in a lot of developed countries is waning. The churches are empty. It's otherwise in certain places in Asia and Africa and elsewhere, but within traditional Western and colonial nations or colonial newcomers like the United States in their own way, um, religion is not working. It's not working. Now, one has to ask why. So I'd like to propose a way of looking at religions as people, not as religions. Now, it's interesting because in the book of Genesis, the Torah, which I revere as a text of great inspiration and meaning. Adam, the first man, is created as Adam, which means humankind. It's both male and female. It includes everything and everyone as a single individual member of what we would call these days a species. A species. By the same token, one could say that all of the participants in a religion, or the co-religionists, are also a group person, okay? A group person. They're a collectivity as one. And that is an interesting phenomenon, because if you look at yourself as an individual, there's nothing singular about any of us. You have in you multiple, personalities. They're not disjunct, so, we all don't need psychiatric medication and intervention. Actually, we do, but it's not as extreme as, the three faces of Eve or Sybil, but we do have multiplicities of identities within the singular thing that we are. So I don't think I am taking the license to call a religion an individual as something which is stretched too far. Religions as individuals, all right, the group individual that is a religion is something that also needs to grow spiritually. And this is something that unfortunately many religions don't want to admit. They don't want to admit it because they have a sentimental fiction in their mind that the religion was established directly by the eternal one, that the notion of God being eternal, right, and all powerful, and that it is fixed and decided on as a fiat by God, and that the religion is established by some form of revelation. That's a very common notion, whether it's a revelation in the form of a book, such as the Quran, or, as some people believe, the Bible, or whether it's the revelation of a human person as a teacher, which then communicates important truths to humanity, and a portion of which become followers, or they preach a wonderful truths and wisdom to their followers that then expand, meet other people, communicate, reproduce, and the religion expands. The religions themselves, though, every single religion there is goes through stages of development as a person. It goes through its infantile stage, where it is a toddler attempting to organize and circulate, to get up, to circulate, to travel, to communicate with other people. And there is not a single religion in the world as a person that isn't like a toddler, tripping over their knickers and falling, and having to get up again and learning how to walk. It is in the history of religion that there are stumblings that take place all along until a certain skill and a certain organization. Spiritually, when there is a form of revelation, whether it is a direct revelation through some scripture, or through a prophecy that is put down in scripture, or a prophecy that is oral, which later may or may not become scripture, when that takes place, it spiritual experience demonstrates that there is an awakening on a higher level. It's a much higher level than mind. It's a supra, it's supramental. It's super mental. It's higher than the mind. And when that opening takes place, which is a connection between the person, in our case, the religion, and something from which forms of thoughts and forms of bodies and forms of things form, what happens is that takes place, and there must be a kind of descensional process spiraling downward, by which that insight, that new spiritual power, enters the religion that is a person, and begins to organize itself and in understandings. That's its mental process. It begins to understand itself by communicating with other people through language, using existing language, modifying existing language, changing the structure of how people communicated in form, by these new insights and these new wisdoms, right? There is an opening oftentimes of the heart, and greater love and greater, emotional purpose begins to emerge as this spiritual knowledge enters down and recycles through it. It garners the will, sometimes associated with the solar plexus. It actually will enter into the tissues deeply, including the genitals and the germ cells, whether it's semen or egg. And then what happens is it becomes ripe to be transmitted and encode, by modifying the genes, methylating them here or there, so that the knowledge actually becomes physical. This is the reality of what is oftentimes called, in one particular religion that's based on incarnation, the incarnation of spirit. But there's a certain scale to it, and I'm not saying that the entirety of all the scale is present in every single religion, though they may believe that as an act of faith. But I am saying that every religion, as a spiritual person, receives a certain light from above, and that reorganizes their mind, their voice and words, the exteriorization of their own mind, which is related to the throat. The hearts open up, the power of the individual, goes forward. People begin to trust their guts, and then it begins to spiral down to the genitals. And without getting too personal, it goes even deeper to the root, which is your sacrum, from the Latin, sacred, the cox, your coccyx at the base of your spine. And in the male of the species, that's where the prostate is, which feeds nourishment to semen, which above has been translated into seminal ideas. So the individual becomes a reproductive system for the perpetuation of ideas. All human beings go through this process, and all religions which are individuals go through this process. With religions, it's even more complex because the integrations involve individuals who themselves are a multiplicity of different identities within themselves that are inherited, which they then karmically have to merge and fuse and work out what is in the larger religious body in each of the individual bodies that are participating in the religion. This is the standard process by which religious illumination takes place. In the history of any individual religion, there are phases of developments. People will they'll get fired. They will get unhealthy. They will lose some people. They will have to merge with another religion, create a religion out of two religions, and then get a new, energy that unifies the two religions and brings them together, and they begin to flower with a new life. The forms of the religions are themselves part of a larger growth, nourishment and growth cycle and spiraling that is part of all life. Part of all life. Now, when religions become so encrusted in their own traditions and their own political ideals, their own belief systems become so entrenched and so cemented that there is no room for further growth and further illumination, the religions begin to experience a loss of people. A loss of people. They are feeling the tug of their own death. Life is not being fed into the religions. Life is being subtracted from the religions. Why there are so many religions which are floundering and not being able to get people, okay, is because they are not seeking the source by which all religions can flourish and grow as individuals. And that source is what we would call God. Religions cease to be on a God search. They try to represent the party line that has been received, the tradition that they have gotten. Tradition, if I remember right, comes from the Latin, to be delivered unto. All right, they get the tradition, they try to pass it off, they try to pump it up, they use media, dancing singers and instruments to try to, dress it up and popularize it and kind of make it appealing to people by superficially dressing it up and making it pretty. Okay. But nonetheless, they haven't solved the problem underneath. So oftentimes, even if religions do a really good job of pumping themselves up and dressing them up and making it pretty and making the music great and light sources and the famous people, and they make it all stars and add a lot of cha-cha to it, it doesn't sustain itself because the source of engendering any human being towards greater goodness is a light which is beyond anything that a human being alone, unaided, can possibly garner themselves. Now, if you look also at the history of religions, you'll see that oftentimes the reverse takes place. If you have, for instance, in the Jewish religion, when you've had at certain times a entrenchment into the legal details and nuances of legal decisions, to the point where that became the dominant mode of all the thinking, and it spread as the dominant personality of the religion. Well, it wasn't long before you get what is commonly called a heresy, where another branch arises whose purpose is to feel joy, to dance, to love. And curiously enough, such a movement, such as the Hasidic movement, was founded by someone who wasn't a rabbi. He had an awakening and a direct illumination out in the woods. It was a natural imbuing of a new spiritual sense, and then the change and the reorganization took place to create a more vibrant and healthy spiritual being, which is a religion. Heresies take place all the time in the Catholic Church, and I say this respectfully, is that when they got too authoritarian, or they justified a level of authority to the priesthood out of context with the rest of the doctrinal foundations of the church, it splintered into a heresy called the Protestant Reformation, which kind of got rid of church law and replaced canon law with individual conscience and reading the Bible as the benchmark for the criterion of truth served in the individual. So here you have an authoritarian individual. I don't know if you've had a very heavy-handed parent who was very authoritarian that you balked against. I did. I had one of my parents who were like that, and that created a heresy, which is a little bit of a rebellious me. Well, the same thing takes place in the individual, which is the religion, as they rebel from the excessive authoritarian parent that the church was, and you create a new person that is less authoritarian and includes individual conscience more, individual interpretation of scripture more, and that then creates another, God knows how many thousands of different variant views, different what's called denominations, all of which in a sense are a heresy, upon heresy, as these different views are aired and formulated, and you get multiple people, each testing out a new view, testing out a new variation on the Protestant theme. And this has happened in Eastern religions also, with different branches of Hinduism and different branches of Buddhism. Every religion must always be on a God search. They are individuals that must constantly seek and grow and evolve. Again, my apologies if I use that word for some people. Evolve so that they remove the blinders, they remove the sunscreens, they remove what is preventing new awakenings, new insights, new energies, new vibrancies to enter into the body, which is the religion, and begin the process of renovating the structures and everything that had been received. So in a way, it's like eating, okay? Knowledge is like eating. In fact, isn't it interesting? You ingest knowledge, you ingest food. You digest knowledge, you digest food. You assimilate knowledge, you assimilate food. And you metabolize it. Okay. Well, when you get knowledge, new knowledge that comes in, you've noticed you have to sometimes have to reorganize how you think about something once you get new knowledge, such as the discovery of DNA. You have to rethink everything that was before in light of this new insight. Well, religions are the same way. In light of new insights into the nature of the world, these new insights reveal other aspects of how life is designed and how life works for good, meaning how do human beings interact with the laws of life so that they can produce good or the experience of God. Just as based on Isaac Newton, early churches had this notion of a kind of a God who was stood on the side and set a motion in place like a clock. It was Newtonian physics, and it was set in the Big Bang, this clock in motion. So everything has to be reinvented when you begin to know that time isn't everywhere in the same place, which comes from Einstein. Religions that are exposed to psychology and the difficulties of early programming on the development of children and the tragedy of a lot of things that happen to kids growing up, have to rethink blanket condemnations of sin due to the original sin of the Garden of Eden. They have to rethink that. They have to qualify it. They have to find a way to take new insights, such as psychological insight, and integrate it into the tradition that they have received in a way that affirms the tradition and what is good and right about it, and one which modifies it. Now, this is very frightening. By the way, if you have these thoughts, go to yourgodsearch.com and please let me hear from you. I mean, you're part of the conversation, you are part of the discussion, and you are part of the healing of every single individual who is itself a religion. It's really important. All right. Let me hear from you. So religions must take into themselves what open up a noumenal experience. Now, I personally believe that religions need to become enlightened, just as individuals need to have their spiritual experiences for their own awakening. So religions need to have spiritual experiences for their own awakening. And that the greatest thing that religions can do, if they want to be popular, if they're people who don't want to be sitting there alone, wallflowers on the side of the prom, is that they have to open themselves up to the source of spiritual life and development, and that draws life to it. Life draws life to life. And the more the religion seeks the source of it all, the more they will be imbued with a very real power, which spiritual experience will, demonstrate to you. And that real power, if properly governed and properly used to modify and stimulate the restructuring of the religion, that will bring religions to life. The new knowledge has to be assimilated and digested. And then what happens is the body that was of the religion before gets new nourishment, new thinking, and it's like the cell structures break down, they get composted, they get catabolized, broken down, and they get metabolized, and they get resynthesized into a new, healthier body. If you've been on a spiritual path for any length of time, you will notice the effect of new spiritual experiences and new spiritual insights, which over time become kind of enfleshed. Your actual body changes to accommodate these new insights. And oftentimes it is not uncommon to have increases in health and increases of longevity as you begin to metabolize greater and greater measures of truth born of true spiritual insight. Now, in an era where science has the torch on truth, and science is a methodology, it is a form, as far as I'm concerned, of a religion. It is an individual that represents scientivism, which is a certain methodology of doing experiments that can be witnessed in multiple places at multiple times and produce the same result. Because we are using that dominant mode of insight right now, which is scientific, we are oftentimes blocking out other forms of knowledge. Knowledges which seem a little more quiet because they don't announce themselves with a proof. Okay. Knowledge is where the invisible forces that exist speak to you, they whisper to you. They give you an expanded self, which enlivens who you are and increases who you are and your ability to share and expand with others in the world. Religions, no less, are capable of expanding who they are and widening their fields and moving past the limitations of simple rational scientivism, which is a religion, and they are capable of engendering these greater insights in their constituency, and the religion as a person can become more illumined. More illumined. Each religion can itself not just be unconsciously lost in heresies and reconstructing and merging and all of these things that are part of the natural cyclings of any ecology, whether it's a tree or whether it's a religion. The religions are capable of partaking in a spiritual power which is real, tastable, and even quantifiable down in the road in the future when we learn how to do that, and which will renovate the religions from the top down, provided you have people who know how to take this knowledge and engineer the change in the body correctly so it can support this higher measure of truth. This is the great challenge of a God search to religions, a God search to religions. And it's my very, very hope that we can approach that era where religions know themselves to be people and can speak to other religions and help each other learn how to have the experience called God as people who are themselves religions, collective humans, collective persona and multiple personalities, not a disease, that participate in the whole of the dynamism of each religious individual. And, I founded a nonprofit organization, which it has laid dormant. It's a dream of mine, called the Alliance for Enlightened Religion. Don't look it up. I don't have a website. It's my hope one day that all the religions will be able to help each other and share their knowledge on how to approach the great mystery of everything and how to help each other learn from each other's mistakes and each other's sins as they're growing and climbing the spiritual ladder to greater knowledge and greater awareness of themselves and the world. The Alliance for Enlightened Religion. Well, I may not do it in this lifetime. I don't know. There's a lot I'm doing, but it is my hope that each of the religions behave as individuals and become friends who not just sing kumbaya, but actually help each other grow in deeper, more profound spiritual ways. So this is Michael Shevack. Go to yourgodsearch.com. Thanks for being here. It is really deeply meaningful to me. And I will see you next week, Wednesday about 5:45 Eastern Daytime. And so, hey, continue your God search, whether you're an individual, or whether you're a religion that is an individual, continue your God search. Uncover God, discover God, and even if you're a religion, for heaven's sakes, please recover God. If you're finding your religion is waning and your congregations are getting small, seek the source of all life, which is a mystery beyond us. Call it anything you want. It's there. Search for it. You'll find it. This is Michael Shevack. Thanks a whole lot. Bye-bye.